Welcome into Paul Catalina's Top 5, presented by Texas Beef House. Today, the top 5 proved to me coaches in 2024. In case you missed it, I'm Paul Catalina. It's not some other person sending me a top 5, and I'm reading it. I'm actually the guy who came up with this. So, if you don't like it, I'm sorry. Genuinely. Number 5, Dave Aranda. This is the one who may have the most number of prove it to me, because really on this list, he's the only guy who is legitimately on the hot seat. But if they go 3-9 again, he's out the door. Changes from last year, new offensive coordinator. He's essentially the defensive coordinator. New players all around. Not only a new offensive coordinator, but a totally new scheme on offense and a commitment to NIL in the transfer portal that is different than their previous attempts at it. All these things are what he should have done. The problem for Dave Aranda is the proof is going to be in the pudding. Are the new players you brought in good enough to compete in the Big 12? Last year, they weren't. And you missed out a recruiting class. The best player of which is in the transfer portal and gone in Armani Winfield. He was the highest ranked player, but he never panned out. So they've got to start hitting on the players that they get not only out of high school, but in the portal, and making moves now at Baylor for Dave Aranda to keep his job this year. I think, based on everything that we know covering it and everything we heard from Sam Kahn's article in The Athletic this week, the fans' expectation for him to be fired is much more than the administration's. They really want to keep him, so that works in Dave Aranda's favor really well, but they really need to be 6-6 or better and in a bowl game this season. Number 4, Lincoln Riley. This is the first year in Lincoln Riley's head coaching tenure, be it at Oklahoma or USC, that he will not have a quarterback that most of the world thinks is a surefire stud. He had such a great run at OU, and then he brought that run with OU with him when he brought Caleb Williams to USC. This year, Miller Moss, Jaden Mayava battling it out in spring. That'll continue into the fall with Miller Moss leading right now. And Miller Moss had that great bowl game, so he's got potential. But are you the QB guru that everybody thinks you are? Especially after losing a 5-star recruit who didn't play last year in Malachi Nelson to the transfer portal and to Boise State at that. So one of the more confusing off seasons in recent memory for a school like USC and a coach like Lincoln Riley. Now, he is the quarterback whisperer, and he gets a lot out of people. So I would not be surprised to see Miller Moss or Jaden Mayava explode on the scene and do really well for Lincoln Riley in an offense that has playmakers all around them. The defense, again, has to be better. He's made changes on that side of the ball, but to me, this is a prove-it season to Lincoln Riley in that let's prove that you can do it without a Caleb Williams, without a Kyler Murray, without a Jalen Hurts, without one of those guys. Can you do this the same way? Because those guys were all pretty surefire hits at quarterback. Miller Moss, maybe, we'll see. Not dogging the kid, but this is one that is far off from Caleb Williams, who everybody expected to be a star from the minute he stepped on campus in Norman and was already a star when he got to LA. Number 3, Mario Cristobal. Now, you may say, Paul, that's very rude of you to not include a GIF of himself, and just the mascot upset. This could be for 2 reasons. One, the most likely one, I'm a jerk who wanted to make fun of Miami. Or 2, there wasn't a GIF of Mario Cristobal wearing Miami clothes, so I didn't use that one. Or, guess what? A phantom third reason, which is a little bit of both. So, I know. I kid because, well, they're Miami. But it's true. Mario Cristobal has Cameron Ward, Damian Martinez, Jacoby George, Xavier Restrepo, Sam Brown on offense. He brought in Simeon Barrow from Michigan State on the defensive line. All stacked new transfers on the defensive line. Returners on defense. Returners on the offensive line. Transfers on the offensive line. This is the best starting lineup he's ever had at Miami. They have to show progress. And because of the talent they have and the money they've spent on Cameron Ward alone to come in there and help them win games, if they don't win, the arrow's not going to be able to point to the talent anymore. It's going to be pointing to the guys who coach that talent, namely Mario Cristobal and his staff, especially offensive coordinator Shannon Dawson. Again, not in danger of getting fired, but if he loses games how he has in the past, and keep in mind that at Oregon and at Miami, he is 1 game over 500 as a head coach in his career. So Can you prove that you're better than a 500 coach this year, Mario Cristobal? Or, even though you've still got some time to build up your alma mater, the storks will start chirping in South Florida. Number 2, Lane Kiffin. Again, very similar to Mario Cristobal in that he's not in trouble. In fact, they love him at Ole Miss. He can stay at Ole Miss for the rest of his career, and they're probably never going to complain. Honestly, he's a great fit in Oxford. None of us here think that he's going to stay at Ole Miss for the rest of his career. But again, less of me would be shocked if it did happen than it would have been, say, 5 years ago. But Lane Kiffin has a roster that he can have only dreamed about in the past. And they have gone all in on the transfer portal. He calls himself the Portal King. I still contend that it is Mike Norvell. But Lane Kiffin is certainly in a prove-it year because you just gone and gotten all this money from your alumni and your boosters and your NIL and all that to get the Walter Nolans of the world in your locker room. You got to perform and do something that Ole Miss has never done and contend for the SEC title all the way through the year. And even if you don't play in that title game, this needs to be a playoff team with the talent they have, no ifs, ands, or buts. Or he's going to find it harder to get that money for himself in coming years. Because some of those guys are going to be there for a year and then walk out the door more than likely, like the aforementioned Walter Nolan. And number 1 on the prove it list, Ryan Day. This obviously came after a loss to Michigan, one of the only schools that Ryan Day has ever lost to. He's lost to Michigan. He's lost to Georgia. He lost a game this year in a bowl game without the starters to Missouri. And then there's probably one other in there. But outside of Michigan and Georgia, 2 of the best programs in the country, and a Mizzou team that was ready to drink their blood and get a big win for their program, he's not really lost anybody. Ryan Day has no stupid, random in-conference losses. Like, he doesn't have that, like, oh, crap, we lost to Maryland. Like, that didn't happen to Ryan Day. He's one of the best coaches in the country. He runs one of the best offenses in the country. He's got one of the best defensive coordinators in the country. His new offensive coordinator is Chip freaking Kelly. But he hasn't beaten Michigan in 3 years, and that's kept him out of the national title race, essentially, even though they were in the playoff just 2 years ago. But if he does not, with the roster that they have gotten through the transfer portal, Quinshon Judkins, Will Howard, Caleb Downs, just to name a few, plus the people that he's retained, which was really impressive that Ohio State retained all the guys that they did. Not guys transferring necessarily, but some guys like Jack Sawyer and JT Tuiamolo, who could have gone to the NFL draft, but came back for another year in Columbus. But this is a prove-it year for Ryan Day. If he doesn't beat Michigan, who should be a little bit down after all they lost last year, including their head coach, and doesn't, make a deep run in the playoff, again, it's the first year of the 12-team playoff, then the birds will start chirping in Ohio for him at the Ohio State University. I feel disgusted that I even fell into that trap and said that, but I did. But Ryan Day, it's a prove-it year for him. Prove that you are really still the top dog in the Big Ten or one of them, and don't just lose to your rival or the big teams. That's been his big, cave that he keeps falling into, or hole. If he can get out of it this year with this roster, he should be off the prove-it list from now on. That's it for the top 5. We're going to wrap it up right now.
All right, Paul Catalina.